Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. In this video, I will respond to Jones on number 31 and the excuses he makes for shifting the blame to Moses and not to God. So let's begin.
Michael, go for it.
Yeah, so he's trying to say that God endorsed it because he gave instructions on what to do with the plunder after. This is false. God often works with the sin of humans in the Bible. For example, God told Abraham that the seed would come through Isaac, and he did not tell him to sleep with Hagar and have Ishmael. Yet God blesses Ishmael eventually.
So Jones says that God works with the sins of humans and points to Genesis 16:3-4. He claims that God didn't tell Abraham to sleep with Hagar, thereby implying that it was a sin, but God still blessed Ishmael. But this is a non sequitur because there is no proof that Abraham committed a sin in the first place. God neither reprimanded him nor punished him, and there's no law anywhere in the Bible that said that you could not sleep with your concubine. This again proves my point. God's silence and lack of action is proof that there was no sin. Furthermore, why was having intercourse with a concubine a sin, but marrying your half-sister was not? Jones never addressed my point about the biblical Abraham marrying Sarah, his half-sister. So wait a second. Jones thinks his God did not approve of Abraham sleeping with Hagar, but still blessed Ishmael, and also didn't bat an eyelid when he chose an incestuous couple to have his chosen servant Isaac. Please, make it make sense.
God did not tell Joseph's brothers to sell him into slavery into Egypt. But then we read in Genesis 50, you intended to harm me, okay? But God meant it for good. Okay, we see this constantly throughout Kings, for example. When the kings make bad decisions, God works with those and restructures the plan. 1 Samuel 8, very, very important passage where the Israelites go to Samuel and we want a king, and God says, this is a bad idea, but I'll work with it. And what happens? Well, then we get King David, and the Messiah comes through the line of David.
So next, Jones appealed to the sin of Joseph's brothers and how God worked with it. But this actually refutes Jones and again proves my point. Unlike Abraham or Moses' alleged sins, it is shown conclusively that Joseph's brothers did commit a sin. They even admitted it themselves in Genesis 42:21. That's the whole point. If what Moses did was so horrible, then why was it never even explicitly called a sin, either by God or Moses or Eleazar the high priest or anyone else? The same problem exists with the examples of the kings making, quote, bad decisions. God clearly condemned the actions of those kings as sins. For example, King Solomon. Not only does God reprimand Solomon for setting up pagan temples, but also punishes him. Again, what this idiot doesn't seem to understand is that God specifically says that it was a, quote, bad idea. He didn't stay silent. Jones needs to show a similar statement from God for Moses' alleged sin, or the sins of the other prophets, and how he, quote, worked with that sin. How exactly did God work with Moses' command to murder the Midianite women and boys, but spare the young girls for sex? This is an utter train wreck so far for Jones. At this point in the live stream, the two cheerleaders attempted to support Jones's claim by giving other examples. For example, Mr. My Hebrew is Trash attempted to excuse the biblical tolerance of slavery by claiming that it was not actually endorsed by God. This is just a flat-out lie.
You can look at what God did to Egypt, for example, to get a sense of what God thinks of slavery, and yet there was some form of slavery allowed in Israel, but yet with an overwhelming number of regulations about it, unknown in the ancient world anywhere else. But that's not an endorsement.
Okay, so first, the story of the Exodus does not show how God truly feels about slavery. That was not the point of the story. God's anger at Egypt was not in its practice of slavery in general, but rather for its oppression of the Israelites. Also, to say the alleged regulations regarding slavery were not found in other cultures at the time is false. Actually, the regulations are often similar to regulations in other cultures. For example, the law in Exodus 20-21, allows beating a slave to the point of death, but stipulates a punishment for the owner if the slave dies. The Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds commentary explains that the law of Hammurabi also had a similar law. A slave could be mistreated, but could not be killed or sold without penalty. Also, the laws in Exodus 21 for slavery are clearly endorsing slavery. So is the law in Leviticus 25:44-46, which commands the Israelites to not enslave each other, but rather to buy slaves from the nations around them. If that is not an endorsement, then I don't know what is. If the biblical God considered slavery to be a sin, why didn't he say that it was a, quote, bad idea, like he did in 1 Samuel 8? Also, why is it stated in Genesis 24:35 that God blessed Abraham with many male and female servants? How could a sin be a blessing? And what about Deuteronomy 20, which Jones keeps appealing to, where God literally tells the Israelites to enjoy their spoils, which included taking human beings as slaves and wives? Notice how it is God himself who has given these spoils to the Israelites to enjoy. So how is this not an endorsement of slavery?